Regarding Men, Episode 23, Sexodus.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to another episode of Regarding Men. I'm Paul Elam with a Voice for Men. I am joined, as always, by the magnificent Tom Golden of MenAreGood.com and the equally magnificent Janice Fiamengo of the Fiamengo Files. And speaking of the Fiamengo Files, we're joined today by none other than the actual producer of that show, which we all love to watch so much, Steve Brule from Studio Brule. Hi, Steve. How you doing?
Great. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for the great introduction.
Oh, sure. It's all true. And today we're going to be talking about men who get the hell out of their country of origin, particularly in North America. Steve is a bit of an expert on this, and I think the first thing I want to do before we get to any of the grilling that we're going to give Steve about his experiences overseas is talk about why men are leaving. And there is a lot of reasons, especially I think between the US and Canada. We share a lot, not just a border, but we share a lot in what's going on culturally right now. The anti-male sentiment, the crazy unrealistic expectations on men in relationships, in their relationship to women, the sense of entitlement that we're breeding into women, the sense of victimization, the infantilization. And generally, and I think this mainly comes from the left, we have an overarching sense of hostility toward all things white and male across the board in both countries. I know, Steve, and this is what I'll start with, that you and I have talked before, and one of the things that you talked about in your decision to spend a lot of time overseas was that you felt unwelcome in your own country. Can you maybe start us off by talking about that some, about your experience in that?
Yeah, sure. In Canada, where is my country, is Canada, it's palpable. Like, we talk about all these issues in the Fiamengo file that even when you walk down the street, as an old guy, you're invisible or you're a nuisance, and you go to a cashier, it's hard to put your finger on the feeling there, but my experience goes back to, negative experience goes back probably to my 30s, really. And when I was in my 30s, I had the sense of, and I absorbed that probably from my environment, that I was pretty much over the hill when I turned into my 30s in Canada. Now, you'll see in the Caribbean and in Colombia here, 30 is still a very young person here. You're treated quite young, and I get a positive response both in Dominican Republic and in Colombia. And I'm almost 60 now, I'm 59. Here, I'll get approached by young women at 30, 35, professional women, regular women doing regular stuff. And you don't get the sense of being over the hill, I could say it that way. And that, on top of that, my experience with the divorce court, of course, radically changed my view of Canada. When I first was faced with losing my son in custody and going through the court system, which, by the way, dragged on the first part for 4.5 years, and the second part, and it continued after that for another 7 years, until it was finally I could basically put it to the side. But when you go in family court as a man, you realize just how low you are on the totem pole. You are the bottom of the totem pole, and that started my, I guess, solidified my view that especially as an older man in Canada, that you're not particularly welcome. You're tolerated so far as you can produce for the society. And you'll find that out pretty fast if you lose your job. How much support does an unemployed older man get in Canada? I don't know, does that help kind of kick off that question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, and I think that there is, there's the more overt stuff, the family courts, which are, again, they're a wreck here in the United States too. They're totally corrupt. They're there to line the pockets of lawyers, to create conflict, and to monetize the destruction of families, which is basically how our family courts are set up. But there's also, and I'll throw this into the conversation, what I've noticed as an older white male here, is that in doing business with people, whether it's in retail stores or service industry or whatever it is, the majority of the time that my partner, Stacy, and I go do business with somebody, the younger clerks and minority clerks, and but not just minorities, younger people in general, and a lot of people even close to our age will make eye contact with her as we're doing business. And as though, and even though 98% of the time I'm the one reaching for my wallet, it's as though I don't exist. And I noticed this strongly. Even you can notice it in a Starbucks. You can notice it I noticed it home shopping, all kinds of things, that there is this attitude, well, yeah, I'll look at you for 2 seconds while you get your wallet out. And then the rest of the time, you don't exist. And I wonder if any of the other three of you actually have noticed this kind of phenomena in both of our cultures.
Well, I've certainly noticed a similar thing, even in just walking down through a mall or down the sidewalk, and if there's women or a group of women coming at you, you'll get the body language like this, and then to look away. If you try to make eye contact with a woman, you'll get this sneery face look, and to look away as if, how dare you look at me in the eye? That's the feeling it gets. And then I actually felt that for a long time, I would feel like, crap, there's something wrong with me. Right. Look at the facial responses I'm getting, and that's an insidious thing. You have to mentally counteract that and understand that there's not something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the culture that trains women in particular to give you that response, and to feel like it's okay to respond to you as if you're toxic or you're diseased or you're some kind of a lowlife who doesn't deserve to walk on the same sidewalk.
Yeah, and that's what the conscious men can do. Men who are aware of things and are able to psychologically have the maturity to be able to do that, can do that. But a lot of men, I think, just soak that in without thinking about it, without being aware of this is a cultural problem that we're facing. And they take in this message that there's something wrong with me,
Yeah,
I can certainly say I took that message in for quite a lot of years.
Yes.
It's hard to shake it. It's hard to think it out of your head, analyze it out, or even forget about it.
Yes, and this is the message men have been getting for years and years. It's not just recently. Men are the disposable sex, and we've been getting that message for a long time. And now it's just gotten worse. It's gotten worse and worse.
Steve,
makes me
go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, I mean, even if you are conscious of it and you're able to combat it, with your own resistance to it, why should you have to do that? I mean, what a waste of a person's energy to have to spend every day telling yourself that the negative messages you're getting back are not founded in anything that's wrong with you. It's amazing. And it's so true. If you think of all the ways that everything about being a man has been demonized in North American culture. Anybody who takes any courses at university has learned all about the male gaze and how it's so damaging. It's objectifying. Men hurt women simply by looking at them, especially if they look at them with any kind of desire that isn't returned by the woman. And then, of course, we have all the other terms that we've heard about so often lately, man spreading. Supposedly, even the way men take up space when they're sitting on the subway or on a bus or they're standing, how dare they put their legs apart? There's something negative about that too. Mansplaining, the way men talk to women, supposedly with contempt and with condescension. toxic masculinity. We all know about male entitlement, male privilege, etc. I mean, it's just unbelievable, this barrage of negative messages. And that this is for the ordinary man who is lucky enough not to be taken to the cleaners by a vengeful ex-wife, or by a woman who makes a false accusation against him, or by a colleague who claims he somehow harassed her at the office, or whatever it happens to be. But just that daily experience of feeling that you're deeply disliked by your whole culture, and that nobody stands up for you in the mainstream media. You're simply supposed to take that and, in fact, apologize for your supposed, privilege. It is just horrible. So
Yes.
we've heard a lot about MGTOW and the ways in which men are organizing their lives so that pleasing women and making women the center of the meaning in their lives, that isn't their primary consideration anymore. And it sounds like what you're talking about, Steve, is taking it to the macro level, actually leaving the country altogether and figuring out a way that one's resources, to a large extent, are not going to support a culture that does that to men. And that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, if I just like to touch base on that idea, is that you don't get any of that in the Dominican Republic. Quite the opposite. You are a desirable asset there. You can say it in that way.
What a concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say that this does affect you. Within a few months, I've been started coming down to the Dominican Republic in 2.5 years ago, and this last visit there, I was there 8 months, and you start to see yourself as desirable after a while.
Can we back up?
That is very important.
Yes, absolutely. Can we back up just a little bit, Steve, and just give us a thumbnail of what you're going through with the Dominican Republic and just sort of a little bit of the history of it?
Well, I came down to get out of the snow for a week with my son 2.5 years ago, and I immediately sensed that this might be something worth investigating further. So I came back down a couple of short visits again, a little bit long, another week, and then I think it was 2 months, and then 4 or 5 months, and 8 months. So, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it, and I started to realize, and it's hard to explain in words what it's like to not be say hated, or to not get a feedback from people that you are obnoxious or that you are toxic or something. And then get the opposite. The flip is really, really dramatic. Okay, it's like 180-degree flip. Now all of a sudden, people look at you with eyes that say, "I want to talk to you some more." With eyes that that see you as valuable, desirable. It's 100% difference. 100% difference. And I've talked about this a lot before. I've talked with Paul, I think, and Janice about this, is that I do think leaving the West is the right choice for any man who can, because you shouldn't live in an environment that sees you as evil. You shouldn't. And Janice touched on this very eloquently when she described, fed back what I was saying about the toxic male gaze and all the rest of that stuff that she was saying. And that I do think Janice's point that you shouldn't have to, but also you shouldn't have to actively counteract that in your head. But I'll say that even counteracting it in your head as a knowledgeable and forceful male, it doesn't work 100%. The message still slips through. You still, even if you're aware of everything, you still start to see yourself as obnoxious or undesirable or evil or any of these terrible messages. You are a monster there. And some of that message gets through, no matter how red pill you are. Leaving, you don't have that environment. That message can leave you after a while. And then on the second side of the importance of I think the Sexodus, as you've termed this episode, is that, starve the beast. makes your money there, spend it elsewhere. That's taking money out of the beast's hands, you know, and you'll live better. Now, there are some things you will sacrifice by coming here, because these are third world countries. So there are some things that you have to get used to and tolerate. But at the end of the day, economically, in my experience, I live twice as good at half the price. Half the price.
I like those numbers.
Yeah.
That brings another question to mind, Steve.
Sure.
You talked about the difference in the way that you feel regarded. And I can tell you, I related a lot to what you just said, because I know and I pride myself on being very red-pilled, but I've had the experience of thinking, well, you know, I should just step into the shadows because I don't feel welcome here. And I mean, I can feel that way in a restaurant when the waitress is interacting totally with my partner and turns to me like, what do you want? And it happens.
Yeah,
and there's a part of me that you can't help but buy into your environment to a certain degree.
Yeah.
It's just impossible to not do that. But one of the things I wanted to ask, now, you talk about the Dominican Republic, and you're coming to us from Colombia right now, and these are, by, you know, North American standards, third world countries. And part of the value that you feel in interacting with the populace there must be the idea that you have money. And I'm not even saying that that's a bad thing, because, you know, that is traditionally how men have been assets, is that they're producers. So I'm not demonizing that in any way. I guess I just wanted to know if you feel like it extends past that. If you feel like the attraction, the connection to other people around you extends past your value as a utility.
Yeah, definitely. With the expat community, as well as with the local Dominicans and Colombians. Just to back up one step here, Colombia doesn't feel like a third world country to me.
Okay.
It is well developed, well organized. You can find first class accommodation here. I mean, very first class, and excellent restaurants. The streets are all clean as a whistle. I'd say as clean or maybe cleaner than Canada. Obviously there's some well-known dangers in Colombia, but also it's not hard to find out and to know where the dangerous areas are. So just like traveling in New York City or Chicago, for instance, which we're going to for the International Conference on Men's Issues, there are some places in Chicago, I'd rather go into the Gorilla Hills here in Colombia than some of those places in Chicago. So having said that, is that, yes, there are dangers, but you don't have to be part of that dangerous cohort, if I can say. I don't think I touched on all of your questions there, because I just went off base a little bit.
No.
You're allowed
the
to
other
go
question, though that wasn't off base, but the other question that Paul was asking was, inevitably some people are going to look at you and say, here's a white man from Canada, he's probably quite wealthy, and some of the friendliness or desire that you may feel coming from some people might be actually a kind of interest in using you for what you can provide. And Paul was saying, well, it's not necessarily really a bad thing, but do you find that, like, do you feel that, or do you also feel there is just a genuine friendliness towards you as a man, quite apart from, because this is a culture that hasn't been steeped in feminist misandry, that there's a genuineness about the response that you get?
Well, definitely there's a financial thing. I mean, you can't get away from that. And but it's there in every country in the world, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
People will always be assessing your status wealth-wise and adjusting their response to you accordingly. And there will always be con artists. There will always be people trying to overcharge you for ththings. I was overcharged in Sarnia, Ontario for buying a pair of pants because they were They had to order them in, and I found out later I was charged double for that. And this is a regular guy in a regular small town, Ontario. So to get that out of the way, that happens everywhere. It's a little bit more here, not here in Colombia. Colombia, I'm not seeing much of that, although it does happen too. But in Dominican Republic, there's quite a lot of that. There will be people who try to overcharge you. But even those places, for instance, when I take my motorcycle to get, say, the oil changed or something like that, right? Normally it's about 100 pesos or so, which is $2 American. And then you pay for the oil, okay? And the whole thing will come out to about $6 American or something like that, or, in that range. Now I've been charged $8, for instance, or $9. But you can talk to them about it. You can not go back. You can find honest ones. But the point of that little story is that even being charged double, it's a quarter of the price in Canada.
Really? I was going to say. Oh, darn, $8.
So sometimes I let it slide.
Yeah,
I let it slide, I'm not going to argue over $2 American on the street,
Yeah.
So you definitely have that, but you don't always have that. There's some people who think that you're going to go down there and you're going to see everybody's trying to double charge you for everything, and there's not that. There are Dominicans who resent other Dominicans doing that, and they sometimes will step in on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a there's no simple answer to that. It's as complicated here and there as it is in every other country. But you are viewed, the default out of the box is they'll see a white man and they'll say, oh, he must have money. But where it goes from there, it's not a given. Where it goes from there is not a given. It can go in many directions from that starting point. And they're like every other group of humans everywhere in the world. There are those who are looking to take advantage, and there are those who are looking for a real relationship with another human being for a richer experience in life. Yes. You can find that easier here, I think, than in Canada, the US.
Very well said.
And what you're saying too, I think, is that even though the default is that money talks, there's a certain friendliness that I think you're describing that's there even beyond that. Is that close?
Of course, yeah. There are super friendly people everywhere in the world, and there are people who like to slice your throat everywhere in the world.
But you are meeting other people, it sounds like, who have made conscious decisions to make their livelihood out of Canada or out of the United States, who have decided that they can have a better life in the DR, for example, and you're thinking that this is a way that a lot of young men should consider going. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'll start out by saying, as a 59-year-old guy in Canada, it's very hard to make friends in a new location if you move somewhere new.
Right.
Because all the people my age are sequestered in their groups. They have their family groups, they have their social groups. Their entire lives are built up and filled every day to every minute. They don't have place for you in their lives. They don't have time. And on top of that, I'm a monster. I'm a old white man. I'm the most hated creature in North America. But here in the Dominican Republic and Colombia, people are very willing to reach out and make friends and incorporate you into their lives. I can have a social activity to do every single day in Costambar. Like there's horseshoes, there's a billiards day, there's motorcycle trips, there's people who play poker every Monday. The poker game goes on all freaking night, so I'm not interested in that. It's too much for me. But and you can tap into that within less than a week of living there. You'll find it, and you'll be able to tap into all of that social life. Now I forgot where I was going with that.
What about in terms of business? Like, are there business opportunities? Are there opportunities to make a living if you're somebody who needs to start out with his own business?
Okay, that's a good point. And I would say there's a lot of reasons that people come to leave. Some of the people I've met never heard of the red pill, don't care about feminism, nothing. They still don't want to live there, okay, in Canada or the US.
Yeah.
But they tap in when I start to talk about my themes. They recognize that stuff right away. But online, anything online obviously is the easiest thing to do because you can do it from anywhere. And if you want to move countries tomorrow morning, you can pick up within a few days wherever you're at. But I've also met guys who are starting up little businesses. There's a couple of expats here in Cali who bought up little apartments and they rent them out on Airbnb. There's a guy here who's bought a couple of motorcycles and he rents them out for the day or the week, and he makes his money here in Colombia. Now, it's a little easier, I think, in the Dominican Republic because there really are almost no laws that'll stop you from doing anything there, business-wise, you know. And 500 pesos, which is $10 US, solves a lot of problems. And so, and I talked to one woman who had registered a Dominican Republic business, and I forget what the business was. And I was telling her, you know, I thought about buying a few motorcycles and blah, 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 renting them out. And she said, well, don't bother starting a business, just do it. And if the police come by and they want to hassle, you know, a little bit of that, everybody's happy. So, but online,
like a plan.
yeah. I recently met a guy from Jamaica who lived in the US for a lot of years, and he's doing online financing for small businesses, or not even small business, big business. So he just meets online. They don't know where he lives. And he has a network of people who provide financing. I'm in favor of something online because of the portability of it.
Yes.
But I've also thought about buying a few motorcycles and taking people on motorcycle trips, you know, to make a little bit on the side.
Yes.
Obviously, someone who writes or makes videos can do it anywhere.
Yep.
And there's another fellow. Sorry, I just
ahead.
mentioned one more. There's another, if you have money, you know, this one's harder, but there's an American fellow, a good friend of mine now, who built and owns a little resort. He just rents out the apartments.
Huh.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, sort of change trajectory for a moment here and ask you something else. I know a gentleman, an Australian fellow who lives in the Philippines and by all measures has a fantastic life there, enjoys it very much. Now, his take on it, though, was that it's really important to learn the lay of the land coming into a different culture, because he says some guys show up there in the Philippines thinking, oh, great, I'm going to get myself a Filipino wife and I'll live cheaply, and they end up getting chewed up and spit out. Other guys who think about what they're doing and act accordingly to their circumstances do quite well over there. So I just wanted to ask, relevant to the DR, what's important for men to know? If a guy was considering to come down there, what would be important? What knowledge would he be best off bringing with him as he tries to figure out how to make it there?
A very good question. And that does happen in the DR too. People who come down there and they get all caught up in the beers on the beach, and there's prostitutes, quite a lot of them. But again, I want to say some guys think because they go always with prostitutes and only seek out the prostitutes or the prostitutes that come to them, they then think that all Dominican women are prostitutes. Big, big, big mistake. Okay? If you only go to prostitutes, you're going to think that prostitutes are all our prostitutes.
Yes.
Not very smart. But yeah, what you said, Paul, is take it easy, be low key, get the lay of the land, get to know people. Don't get involved with the first people who come. If you do that in New York City, or you do that in Chicago, or you do that in Ottawa, and you're walking down the street and some person, woman or man, comes up to you, all cheery, everything's wonderful, and you just jump right in there, what do you think you're jumping into? You've been targeted. You've been targeted by them in Canada, in the US, anywhere. I was ripped off in Paris and in Nice, you know? So yeah, anywhere you go, you have to take it easy, understand the culture a little bit, understand who's who. You get to know somebody's background. Now, I ran into a guy who's from, in Costambar, who's from a European country. I forget which it is. But he jumped right in, bought a $250,000 condo without really searching things out, right on the beach. And then got involved with people who were like enthusiastic about him on the beach. And I know, I met him, I talked to him one time. I said, look, you got to kind of be a little more low key. You're kind of flashing money around all over the place. And you're getting involved with some guys who are known drug dealers. And he's had them over to his place. So I was talking about this before. And I think a guy like that is targeted. And he's making himself a target.
Yes.
He didn't spend enough time investigating the location. He's not like sitting back and getting to know people before inviting them into his life. That can be a problem anywhere in the world. Right. You've got to get to know somebody before you invite them into your life, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and you've learned the language, right, Steve?
Little by little, I'm learning more and more. And I think that's really, really important. Even if you don't learn a lot, you should be open to learning the language, and people recognize your openness to trying to speak their language, and they will respond to you in a friendlier manner.
Yes,
absolutely.
And help you when you don't speak right. You know, people.
Yes.
So there are some that come down to Dominican Republic and they don't like the language, and they even say they don't like the language, and they don't try to to speak the language, and you know. How can you expect to get a positive response in a culture you're living with when you basically reject the culture entirely?
Yeah.
I think we could safely assume that those are not the people you hang out with, Steve.
Well, some of them are not bad guys, and I'll spend some time with them. But you know, I do tend to want to look for the good side of the culture and integrate myself into that part of it. And there's a lot of good side.
Yes.
You know.
You
But it's not gonna fall in your lap the first day you land there because you're a gringo. What's the first thing that's gonna fall in your lap in anywhere you go as a target is all the con artists are gonna come to you right away.
Yes.
They're the first people who are gonna find you. The prostitutes and the con artists will be the first people to find you. That's why you got to learn the lay of the land, and then learn who are real people doing a regular life, trying to do the things that everybody does, have some good friends, some good emotional connections with people, some common interests, people. And I'll quote, not quote, but paraphrase from Jordan Peterson. Try to make the world a better place and connect with people who are trying to make the world a better place. I think that is really in the shortest form of how to have a good and meaningful life, no matter where you live.
Yes. You mentioned the expat community, and I'm just curious, A, how do you find them? And B, can you tell us a little bit about what that is, who that community is?
There are some known expat areas like Costambar, and some areas.
There's areas where people hang out. They're mostly expats.
Costambar is like a little community just outside of Puerto Plata. So you'll meet expats on the beaches everywhere you go. I mean, it's almost impossible not to meet expats in Dominican Republic. So you won't have a problem meeting expats. And then by talking to them, you'll quickly find out where other expat areas are.
Yes.
If you're looking for expat areas.
Yes.
So it's not a concern. You won't have any trouble finding those areas in Dominican Republic.
And it's mostly men, are the expats?
I would say more than 50%, but there's a surprising number of women too. Yeah.
Steve, I think we probably need to ask, because I think it'll probably come up in the comments. There's been a lot of media coverage on the DR in the United States recently with the deaths of a long string of Americans. It's been very sensationalized, and because we know that's what sells in our media is sensational stories, whether they're totally grounded in fact or not. But you are, so to speak, the horse's mouth here, that we can hear from about, do you feel safe? Do you feel that there is a secret conspiracy to kill people in hotel bars? Or what's going on down there? I just sort of like to get I know we've discussed this before, but for the benefit of the audience, I'd like to get your take on this, because I think what you had to say was very interesting.
Okay, perfect question. A very important question, your safety. Something like 2 million Americans visit the DR every year, 2 million. And these aren't a random selection of Americans. These are wealthier, overweight, older Americans. And they fly on sometimes like an 8-hour flight or longer for they're switching airplanes. A lot of these people have pre-existing health conditions and heart conditions and all the rest of that. They come in from a cold area on a long flight, and the first thing they do is go and pound down beers on the beach, and they forget taking their medicines, and so some of them are going to die. Out of 2 million people, even if they didn't leave their own living room, if you were able to assess that cohort of 2 million people in the US in a year, a lot of them are going to die just sitting in their living room chair in that year, And of course, with the stress of travel and drinking in the heat and change of climate and all the rest of that, and forgetting to take your medicines, a little bit more percentage of them are going to die in the Dominican Republic than in the US. Okay, so some of that is coming from that position, I think. I don't think there's a conspiracy to go out and randomly kill gringos in the Dominican Republic. I don't think anybody who's living there does believe that. So a part of it is that the cohort of people and the huge numbers of people visiting the DR every year. That doesn't mean that there aren't other dangers in the DR, because there are. There's a lot of very poor people, some of whom are angry and violent, and will seize an opportunity to profit, by generally robbing. And if that robbery leads to violence, they're quite capable and willing to use violence. If you're going to be robbed there, let them take your stuff. That's what they want, Now, when it comes to people living there, we touched on this before, is that there are some women there who are not good women. And sometimes, you've got to get to know them. And for instance, one of our friends was murdered last winter in January, I think it was, or February. And his wife is in jail for it. Now, the story is, and again, this has not gone through the court system yet, but the story is that, he wanted to divorce her. He was claiming he was going to divorce her and she wasn't going to get anything. It was a very kind of tumultuous situation. And the story is that she hired 2 guys to kill him before he would divorce her, so she could have his stuff and his money. So that,
of course, that sort of thing never happens in North America.
Exactly. Paul. Exactly. That can happen anywhere. So guys, you can't come down to a place like Dominican Republic and think that none of these things over there are going to happen over here. They happen everywhere.
Yeah.
And to be honest, okay, she was a very young woman, very beautiful. And he was about my age. So there could have been a plan from the start, if you will, on that. And that's not that hard to spot, It's not that hard to spot a young woman who's looking to relieve you of responsibility of your assets.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yes, sir. It did. It answered it very directly. Thank you. Well, is there any other? I think I've exhausted my questions.
What advice would you give to young men here, Steve?
Put your effort into creating a career that's portable. So that you're not stuck in a situation. This was a big mistake I made early in my life. I unconsciously moved in my career and just pursued things that I thought were important or interesting, which is good. That's why I studied chemistry in the first place, not knowing that chemistry, being a chemist, I mean, I had to be where the chemical industry it was.
Right.
That got me stuck in not places I didn't want to live for 22 years. So I would say something like computer science, or if you're a writer, that's great. If you can sell your material or create videos online like you guys do, or anything that can be portable, and anything related to computers and internet generally fits into that category. Yeah. So and also self-employed. Don't get stuck with a company.
Yeah.
These companies are not reliable. They will fire you on a dime, leaving you with responsibilities and no income. And then thirdly, I would say, get out of the West.
Yeah.
You know, get yourself some source of income that makes you mobile. Make your money there through the internet or whatever ways you can. Whether you could buy little properties and selling them and rent them out, and you can manage that from anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a friend when I first started, and he was very smart about this. When he first started working at 22, 23 years old, he bought a small house with lots of rooms in it. He rented out 5 rooms in the same house to other people who were coming to work.
Yep.
And he was making money and living for free.
And they were paying his mortgage.
And they're paying his mortgage.
Yeah.
So young guys, I mean, you got 30 years ahead of you. That is a great option. And you can take whatever cash you have and put it into a next property, build up yourself a little empire that you can manage from anywhere as well. Mm. So don't get yourself in a trap.
Yes.
Any kind of trap. Avoid traps and think of your freedom, your liberty. And as soon as you can, leave the West and experience life elsewhere, so you can see and feel what it's like to be a valued member, a valued person.
And I'm guessing you would also say, take a vacation for a week and see if you like it. You know, then come for a month and see if you like it. And because that's what you did. That was really smart on your part to do that, I think.
That is a very good point. And thank you for raising that, because you can't, if you just go blindly, you might commit yourself to an area that, you don't really want. Yep. Don't commit too early.
Yep.
Go, just check it out.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here in Colombia right now, is that I want to check out Colombia. And I tell you, it's different than the ideas I had in my head, even though I read a lot about it.
Yeah.
I read online. You can't tell enough by reading online. One reason is that people lie to you online.
No.
I don't believe you. I think you're lying.
That's one reason. And also is that each of you young men is different. Some of you are going to come to Colombia and hate it. Some of you are going to come to Colombia and love it.
Exactly.
Some of you are going to come to Dominican Republic and hate it. Some of you are going to come and love it.
So in other words, you're saying don't take your word for it. Come down and find out for yourself.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in everything in life. Because your neighbor loves something doesn't mean you are going to.
Amen to that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, thank you, Steve. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it was fascinating stuff.
Very, very good discussion. Thank you for that, Steve. It was good to see you. We don't see you enough these days.
Indeed.
I'm still hoping to come to ICMI. I haven't got the funds raised yet, but I actually recorded a fundraising video, but I'm going to re-record it because I promised to do a lot of interviews, and I'm just lately been overwhelmed with managing equipment. So if I come, it's going to be mostly just maybe with a voice recorder to do audio interviews, but I'll have to come minimum because there's just too much going on. I have to organize things, a lot of things to organize in Ottawa when I come back up to visit next month. And I have to organize my stuff I still have left in Ottawa, which is all a bit of chaos up there right now. So it's a hard time, but I still want to come to ICMI. I'll probably look for some fundraising from folks if they can help me out there, but I'll only probably promise, I won't promise too much in interviews, and it'll probably, if they're, the interviews I do will probably just audio interviews without a lot of camera equipment.
Yeah.
Hey, man, just get yourself there any way you can.
You can, yeah.
Now, we have some recognitions, some of our weekly recognitions to get out here. One of them being the Flying Puta Award. There is, one of these goes out each week to somebody particularly, I don't know, despicable, untrustworthy, unlikable. How can I put this? And this week's Flying Puta goes to none other than I think, one of the great originators of the trend in men going their own way and getting the hell out of the West, and that would be none other than Justin Trudeau, or he's known Crying Justin, as Donald Trump would call him. I think my reason for wanting him to get this award this week is that he's a horrible human being.
He certainly never saw a pro-female, anti-male piece of government legislation that he didn't like.
No matter how draconian.
Amen.
Yeah. So
Yeah, like most of the U.S. Congress.
And so I wasn't saying that in jest. I think people that step on their fellow man's neck in order to get ahead politically are horrible people. They're bad people. And so, Justin, this one's for you.
He'll be riding in no time.
And let's hope he's out in October, because the federal election's coming up in a few months.
We'll turn him upside down for that.
Yes, there he goes.
There he goes. Bye-bye, Justin, you upside down cake, you. And how about the humanitarian award? Who gets that,
I
Paul?
was thinking Janice would like to offer that one out.
That's a good idea.
we're offering it to Steve Brule for, as Paul said earlier, the man who didn't just talk about getting out and starting a new life and pioneering a new way of being, but did it. So congratulations, and thanks for documenting it, for encouraging other men to think about doing something similar, pioneering their own way.
Well said.
And for all the things you've documented over the
Yes, of course.
years, bringing us the Fiamengo files and the Warren Farrell protest and all the work around the ICMIs, and just one thing after another, after another. You're overdue for some recognition.
Amen.
So thank you.
A lot.
Indeed.
This is a huge honor. Thank you very much for this, folks.
Good. It's well deserved. And are we ready?
Okay, yeah.
All right.
We're ready.
Men are good.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Y'all take care.
Bye.
We'll see you. I lost the screen.
Turn the fucking thing off.
Turn the fucking thing off. Golden.